The water in the Maldives wasn't just blue. It was a shimmering tapestry of turquoise and sapphire, so clear you could see the white sand 30 feet below. From the deck of his private overwater bungalow at the Serafina Resort, Conrad Beaumont felt like a king surveying his kingdom. Beside him, the beautiful Kira Jensen laughed, her hand resting on her barely there baby bump. This was it, the perfect escape, a Babymoon for the child he believed would complete his perfect life. But 8,000 miles away, his 9 months pregnant wife Lorraine wasn't packing a hospital bag. She was systematically dismantling his empire, one phone call at a time. Conrad's paradise was about to become his prison, and the first clang of the bars shutting was the quiet, humiliating sound of a credit card being declined. Conrad Beaumont didn't just live the American dream. He'd coded it, monetized it, and sold the IPO. His company Nexus Pay had revolutionized the fintech world, turning him from a caffeine-fueled coder in a garage into a titan of industry before his 35th birthday. His life was a carefully curated collection of success symbols, a sprawling penthouse overlooking Central Park, a garage filled with cars that whispered of power rather than shouted, and a beautiful, intelligent wife, Lorraine Davenport. Lorraine was no mere socialite. She was a Davenport, a name that carried the quiet weight of old money and legal prowess. With a law degree from Yale and a mind as sharp as a shard of glass, she had been Nexus Pay's first general counsel. She was the architect of its ironclad legal structure, the silent partner who had secured the fortress while Conrad led the charge. They had been a team, an unstoppable force. But 3 years ago, after a difficult journey with fertility treatments, Lorraine had stepped back. Her new project, the one that mattered most, was growing inside her, their son. In the final weeks of her pregnancy, a subtle chill had crept into their opulent home. Conrad, once doting and present, became a ghost in his own life. "It's the pressure of the Q4 report," he'd say, kissing her forehead, before disappearing back to the office for another late night. "Just securing our boy's future, darling." Lorraine, swollen and exhausted, wanted to believe him, but she hadn't gotten where she was by being naive. She noticed the small things. The second phone that was always silenced and face down. The scent of a perfume, a light floral scent, nothing like her own sandalwood and vanilla, that clung faintly to his shirts. The way his eyes would glaze over when she talked about Lamar's classes, his mind clearly a million miles away. The lie that broke the dam was a simple one. "I have to fly to Singapore," he announced one evening, meticulously folding a brand-new linen shirt into his suitcase. "A surprise summit with our Asian market investors. It's last minute a real pain, but it's $1 billion deal. I'll be back in 5 days, long before the little guy decides to make his debut." He looked her in the eye as he said it. The sincerity in his gaze was so polished, so practiced, it was almost perfect. Almost. Lorraine smiled, a placid, gentle expression that betrayed none of the acid churning in her stomach. "Of course, my love. Be safe. Close that deal for our family." As soon as the penthouse door clicked shut, her serene mask crumbled. She moved with a purpose that defied her heavy belly, heading straight for his home office. She wasn't looking for texts or emails. That was amateur hour. Conrad was a tech genius. His digital security was flawless. But his weakness, she knew, was his ego. And his ego was serviced by one thing above all else: luxury retail. She logged into the shared family account for their concierge service, a high-end firm that handled everything from private jet bookings to sourcing rare watches. She scrolled through the recent activity. A dinner reservation for two at a place he'd told her was booked solid for months. A purchase from a high-end baby boutique in Soho, strange, since they had a fully stocked nursery. But it was the last item that made the air leave her lungs in a silent scream. A charge from Boucheron and Fields, their private jeweler. The work order attached as a PDF for their records was for a custom-made charm bracelet. It was a push present, a gift for a new mother. But the details were horrifyingly specific. A platinum band with 3 charms, a miniature globe, a tiny, intricately detailed seaplane, and a small engraved disc. Lorraine zoomed in on the jeweler's digital mock-up. The engraving on the disc read, "For KJ, our adventure begins. Love. See, KJ." The initials hit her like a physical blow. Kira Jensen, a bright, ambitious marketing associate from Nexus Pay. 26 years old, raven-haired with the kind of hungry look in her eyes that Lorraine recognized because she used to have it herself. Lorraine had seen the way Conrad's gaze lingered on Kira during the last company gala. A fleeting moment, but she had filed it away, a splinter of unease in the back of her mind. The globe, the seaplane. It wasn't Singapore. It was a destination, a private romantic trip. The baby boutique. The push present. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. Kira Jensen was pregnant too. This wasn't just an affair. It was a betrayal of a magnitude she could barely comprehend. He was building a second life, a mirror image of their own, with a younger model. For a long moment, Lorraine simply stood there, in the silent, cavernous office, the glow of the monitor illuminating the tears that now streamed down her face. The grief was a physical weight pressing down on her chest, threatening to suffocate her. She felt the baby kick, a strong, insistent reminder of the life she was carrying, the family she thought she was building. And in that moment, the grief began to cool. It hardened, solidifying into something else. Something cold sharp and diamond hard. Rage. She was Lorraine Davenport. Her name meant something. Her father hadn't raised a victim. Conrad had mistaken her love for weakness. He had mistaken her pregnancy for incapacitation. He had forgotten who he had married. He had forgotten that the woman who built the legal walls of his fortress knew exactly where all the back doors were. He wanted a Babymoon. She would give him a trip he would never, ever forget. She picked up her phone, her hand steady, her mind whirring with cold, calculated precision. Her first call was not to a divorce lawyer. It was to her father. "Dad," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion, "I need you to make a few calls for me. We need to liquidate some private assets and move them. Quietly. And I need the name of the best international banking security consultant you know. Conrad's on a trip. I want to make sure he has a memorable one." Arthur Davenport was a man who moved through the world with the quiet confidence of someone who had never lost a fight he cared about. Retired from the helm of a white shoe law firm that bore his name, he now spent his days managing his vast estate in Connecticut, but his mind had lost none of its predatory sharpness. When he heard his daughter's voice on the phone, flat, controlled, yet humming with a terrifying undertone, he knew this was not a social call. He listened without interruption for 10 minutes as Lorraine laid out the situation. He didn't offer condolences or platitudes. Arthur Davenport dealt in strategy, not sympathy. When she was finished, there was a brief pause. "The fool," Arthur said, his voice a low rumble. "He flew too close to the sun with another man's wings. Your wings, Lorraine. What is your objective?" "I want him crippled, Dad," she replied, the words tasting like metal in her mouth. "Not ruined. Ruin is messy and takes years. I want him isolated and powerless. I want him to understand what it feels like to have the world you built dissolve into thin air. The money, the access, the identity. All of it. Gone. A laudable goal, Arthur said, a hint of pride in his tone. Strategic, not emotional. Good. Here is what we will do. For the next 48 hours, Lorraine's penthouse became a war room. Arthur drove in from Connecticut, bringing with him a man named Peterson, a former MI6 agent who now ran a discreet private security firm in London, specializing in asset protection and recovery. Peterson was a pale, unassuming man in a rumpled suit who looked more like an accountant than a spy, but his eyes missed nothing. Together, the three of them mapped out Conrad Beaumont's entire financial and legal existence. Lorraine, as the co-signer on nearly every account and the architect of their family trust, held more power than Conrad had ever bothered to remember. The primary accounts are joint tenancy, Lorraine explained, pointing to a flowchart she'd drawn on a whiteboard. Nexus Pay stock brokerage accounts are main checking. He thinks that gives him equal access. But the family trust, which holds the bulk of our liquid assets, names me as the primary trustee with full discretionary power in the event of spousal incapacitation or malfeasance. I wrote that clause myself. Arthur permitted himself a small, wolfish grin. Malfeasance. A beautiful, wonderfully vague word. An affair with a pregnant employee, while you're 9 months pregnant yourself, I believe that qualifies. Peterson nodded. The offshore accounts in the Caymans and Switzerland are in his name only. Those will be harder to touch directly. We don't need to touch them, Lorraine countered. We just need to cut off his access to them. His passport. Conrad Beaumont, the global jet-setter, is nothing without it. Peterson leaned forward. You can't legally have a citizen's passport cancelled without cause. Of course not, Lorraine said, her voice cold. But a wife deeply concerned for her husband's increasingly erratic and paranoid behavior can certainly report his passport as lost or potentially stolen to the State Department. She can file a police report stating that in a fit of rage, he stormed out of the house taking his documents, and she hasn't been able to reach him since. She fears for his mental state and for what he might do. Such a report would trigger a flag in the international database. It wouldn't invalidate the passport immediately, but it would prevent him from boarding any commercial flight or crossing any border until the flag is cleared, a process that can take weeks. Arthur looked at his daughter with newfound respect. This was his blood, his legacy of strategic warfare, refined and weaponized. The plan was executed with military precision. Phase 1. Financial strangulation. On Monday morning, Lorraine, armed with a power of attorney Arthur had drafted years ago, visited their private banker at J.P. Morgan Chase. She calmly explained that due to a serious family emergency and concerns over Conrad's mental stability, she was invoking her rights as trustee. Within an hour, billions of dollars in assets were moved from their joint accounts into a new trust in her name only. The funds in the Cayman and Swiss accounts remained, but they were now islands unreachable without the passwords and security fobs that were sitting in a safe in their New York apartment. Next, she called the concierge at American Express. She was the primary holder of their coveted Centurion card, the mythical black card. Conrad's was a supplementary card. "I'm reporting my husband's card as stolen," she said, her voice laced with practiced distress. "His wallet was taken. Please cancel it immediately and flag all charges." She did the same for their Visa and MasterCard accounts. In the space of 3 hours, Conrad Beaumont's wallet, filled with plastic that could buy a skyscraper, became utterly useless. Phase 2. Digital isolation. Peterson handled the next part. He used a contact within a telecom provider to have Conrad's primary US cell number suspended, citing a security breach. His secondary burner phone would still work, but it was a prepaid device with a limited data plan. More importantly, it wasn't linked to any of his banking or security apps. Without his primary number, he couldn't receive the two-factor authentication codes needed to access his online banking, his crypto wallets, or even his corporate email. He was digitally castrated. Phase 3. The narrative. This was Lorraine's masterstroke. She didn't want Conrad to look like a cheating husband. She wanted him to look like a man who had lost his mind. It was a more effective way to neutralize him and garner sympathy. She sent a carefully worded email to the board of Nexus Pay and a few key trusted friends. Subject: personal update and request for discretion. Dear all, I'm writing to you with a heavy heart. As many of you know, Conrad has been under immense pressure lately. I'm afraid the stress has taken a severe toll on his mental health. He has become erratic and paranoid, and against my and his doctor's advice, he has left the country without notice. I am unable to reach him, and I am deeply concerned for his well-being. I am working with the relevant authorities to ensure his safety. In the meantime, I ask that you respect our family's privacy and direct all urgent Nexus Pay business to the COO. Please, if he contacts you, urge him to come home and get the help he so desperately needs. It was a work of art. It painted her as the worried, loyal wife and him as a tragic figure, not a villain. It sowed doubt and confusion, ensuring that if he did manage to call anyone for help, they would meet his pleas with suspicion and pity, not a lifeline. By Tuesday afternoon, the trap was set. Lorraine sat in her silent penthouse, looking out over the city. She felt a profound and terrible emptiness, but also a surge of power she hadn't felt in years. She had built an empire with him. Now she had taken it back. Meanwhile, 8,000 miles away, Conrad Beaumont was ordering another bottle of champagne, utterly oblivious that his kingdom had already fallen. The Serafina resort in the Maldives was less a hotel and more a private universe of indulgence. Each overwater bungalow was a self-contained estate, complete with a private infinity pool, a personal butler, and a glass floor in the living room for watching the kaleidoscopic marine life glide by. For 3 days, Conrad and Kira lived in a sun-drenched fantasy. They snorkeled with sea turtles, had massages on a secluded sandbank, and dined under the stars, their feet in the warm sand. Conrad felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years, away from the pressures of New York, away from the impending reality of fatherhood with Lorraine, a reality that had begun to feel more like a business merger than a loving partnership. He felt free. Kira, for her part, was playing the role of a lifetime. She was effusively grateful, endlessly adoring. She would gaze at him with worshipful eyes, telling him how powerful, how brilliant he was. She talked excitedly about their baby, a girl, she hoped. They would raise her between New York and maybe a house in the Hamptons. It was the exact fantasy Conrad wanted to hear. "You know," he said to her on their 3rd night, swirling a ridiculously expensive burgundy in his glass, "Lorraine just doesn't get this. She'd be analyzing the resort's profit margins. You just enjoy it. You live in the moment. It's easy to live in the moment when the moment is perfect," Kira cooed, leaning in to kiss him. The fantasy shattered the next evening at Azure, the resort's signature underwater restaurant. They were seated at the best table, surrounded by curved glass walls that gave them a 180-degree view of a coral reef teeming with life. It was breathtaking. The bill arrived in a small mother-of-pearl box. It was even for Conrad an eye-watering sum. He handed the waiter his Amex Centurion card without a second thought. The waiter, a polite man named Faris, returned a few minutes later, his expression apologetic. "I'm very sorry, Mr. Beaumont. The card has been declined." Conrad frowned. "Declined? That's not possible." "Run it again." Faris bowed slightly. "I have, sir. 3 times. The system says to contact the issuer." A flicker of annoyance. "Fine." Conrad pulled out his JP Morgan Reserve Visa. "Use this one." Faris returned again, his face now etched with discomfort. "My apologies again, sir. This one as well. And the MasterCard." Conrad's annoyance curdled into confusion. He could feel Kira's gaze on him, her perfect smile faltering. "This is ridiculous." He snapped his voice louder than he intended. Several diners turned to look. "There must be a problem with your system." "Perhaps, sir," Faris said smoothly, though his eyes told a different story. "If you would be so kind as to speak with our resort manager, Mr. Hassan, he can assist you in his office." The walk from the underwater restaurant to the manager's office was the longest of Conrad's life. The hushed whispers of the other guests followed him like a trail of smoke. Kira trailed behind him, her silence a heavy weight. Mr. Hassan was a distinguished man, with silvering hair and an impeccably tailored suit. His office was a sanctuary of calm, with mahogany furniture and views of a tranquil lagoon. His demeanor, however, was all business. "Mr. Beaumont," he began, his tone courteous but firm. "We have a slight issue. Not only was your card declined for tonight's dinner, but the pre-authorization we took on your Centurion card at check-in has also been revoked by the bank. As it stands, your entire stay, including the seaplane transfer, is currently unpaid." Conrad stared at him dumbfounded. "That's impossible. There are millions of dollars in those accounts." "That may be, but we are unable to access them," Mr. Hassan replied. "Do you have another form of payment? A wire transfer, perhaps?" Conrad pulled out his phone. He would fix this. A simple call to his private banker. He dialed the number, but it wouldn't connect. Call failed. He tried again. Nothing. He checked the signal. Full bars. He tried to open his banking app. Authentication required. "A code has been sent to your registered mobile number." He waited. No code arrived. A cold dread, slick and oily, began to seep into his veins. He tried to log into his Nexus Pay email. Password incorrect. He knew it was the right password. He tried the forgot password link. Recovery instructions sent to your primary contact email and phone number. His primary contact email was a private account he couldn't access, and the phone number was the one that was now mysteriously dead. He was locked out. He was completely and utterly locked out of his own life. "Kira," he said, his voice strained. "Give me your card. I'll pay you back." Kira looked at him, her eyes wide with a dawning panic. She was a marketing associate. Her credit card had a $10,000 limit. The bill for their stay was already approaching 6 figures. "Conrad, I can't cover this." Mr. Hassan cleared his throat. "Mr. Beaumont, our policy in these situations is quite clear. We will of course provide you with basic accommodation and meals. However, all non-essential services will be suspended. Your access to the spa, the fine dining restaurants, and the water sports facilities will be revoked. We will hold your luggage and passports as collateral until the bill, which currently stands at $112,450, is settled in full." Conrad felt the blood drain from his face. His passport. They had his passport. "This is a misunderstanding," he stammered, the words feeling hollow even to him. "My wife. She must have. I need to call New York." Mr. Hassan offered him the use of his landline. Conrad frantically dialed his assistant, his friends, board members, anyone he could think of. The responses were all unnervingly similar, his assistant sounding flustered. "Conrad. Oh my God, are you okay? Lorraine told us you were having some kind of breakdown. We've all been so worried." A board member, his voice thick with false concern. "Conrad, my boy, just come home. Whatever it is, we can get you the help you need. Don't worry about the company, we'll handle things." No one would help him. Lorraine's narrative had reached them first. He wasn't a man in trouble. He was a man who was unwell. A liability. He finally hung up the phone, his hand trembling. He was stranded on a tiny speck of land in the middle of the Indian Ocean. He had no money, no working phone, no way to access his empire, and no way to leave. The beautiful turquoise water outside the window suddenly looked like the walls of a very luxurious, very expensive prison. He turned to look at Kira. The adoration in her eyes was gone, replaced by something else, fear and a cold, calculating assessment. The fantasy was over. Welcome to hell. The walk from the sun-drenched perfection of the resort's guest area to the functional hidden-away staff quarters was a journey across a social chasm. Led by two silent security guards, Conrad and Kira traversed a path he never knew existed, leaving behind the manicured gardens and infinity pools for a world of concrete walkways, humming generators, and the steamy industrial scent of the laundry facility. It was the resort's engine room, a place of work and function, never meant to be seen by the gilded class of guests. Their new room was a sterile box. Two narrow twin beds with thin starched sheets were pushed against opposite walls. A small barred window offered not a vista of the turquoise ocean, but a close-up view of a massive, perpetually spinning exhaust fan. The air was thick with humidity and the faint smell of bleach. As the heavy door clicked shut behind the guards, the finality of their situation settled with the suffocating weight of a physical blow. The paradise they had inhabited was a stage set, and they had just been unceremoniously shoved backstage. For the first 24 hours, Conrad vibrated with a furious, impotent energy. He paced the 4 short steps from the door to the window, and back a caged predator stripped of his teeth and claws. He would grab his dead phone and glare at the black screen, as if his sheer force of will could resurrect it. His mind, accustomed to solving complex code and navigating billion-dollar deals, could not process this simple, absolute powerlessness. "This is a kidnapping," he roared at Mr. Hassan during one of several fruitless visits to the manager's office. "It's illegal. I'll have your job. I will buy this entire God-forsaken island and turn it into a parking lot." Mr. Hassan, immaculate in his linen suit, simply listened with the patience of a man who had seen every form of wealthy hubris imaginable. "As soon as your bill is settled, Mr. Beaumont, you are free to go," he would reply, his voice a maddening oasis of calm. "Until then, our policy is firm." Kira watched this display with a growing sense of dread. The powerful magnetic CEO, she had idolized, the man who commanded boardrooms with a single glance, was gone. In his place was this red-faced shouting man, flailing against a wall of polite, immovable bureaucracy. The fantasy she had so carefully constructed, the life of effortless luxury, the ascension into New York's elite, the security she craved, was crumbling into dust. Her admiration, once the bedrock of their affair, was eroding with every failed threat he uttered, replaced by a cold, creeping contempt. He wasn't a king. He was a fool who had lost his crown, and he had dragged her down with him. By the second day, the silence between them in the small room had become a weapon. It was thick with unspoken accusations. His blame, her resentment. Finally it broke. "What is your plan, Conrad?" Kira asked, her voice tight and brittle. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. "Because pacing and yelling at the manager isn't working." He whirled on her, his eyes wild. "My plan. I'm trying to fix the mess she made. This is Lorraine. She's lost her mind. It's the pregnancy hormones, they've made her completely irrational. She's crazy." Kira let out a short, bitter laugh. "Crazy. Or the only sane one among us. She seems to have thought of everything with remarkable clarity. And don't you dare hide behind her pregnancy. You lied to a 9 months pregnant woman, Conrad. You lied to her face, then ran off with your younger, also pregnant mistress to a tropical paradise. What did you think was going to happen? Did you truly believe that Lorraine Davenport, the legal eagle who helped build your entire company, would just sit at home and knit booties?" The raw truth of her words was like a slap. He had been arrogant. He had seen Lorraine's pregnancy as a state of weakness, a distraction that would allow him to operate with impunity. He had forgotten the formidable intellect he had once so admired. "It was all going to be handled," he shot back, his voice defensive. "The divorce was going to be amicable. I was protecting her." "Protecting her." Kira stood up, her eyes flashing with a fury that mirrored his own. "By humiliating her on a global scale, you weren't protecting her. You were protecting yourself from a difficult conversation. And what about me? You told me it was over between you two. You sold me a future that was apparently built on a foundation of lies. And what about your future?" He sneered, lashing out. "You think I don't know what this was about? You saw a ticket to the top and you took it. And what's wrong with that?" She screamed, tears of rage and self-pity welling in her eyes. "Isn't that how your world works? Everyone taking what they can. I've given years of my life to Nexus pay, working twice as hard for half the recognition. You promised me a promotion, a real seat at the table. Now my career is over. When this gets out, I'm not just the other woman. I'm the idiot who got stranded on a desert island with the CEO when his wife cut him off. I'm a punchline. Your career," he scoffed, the sound dripping with disdain. "I'm facing total catastrophic ruin. She is trying to steal my company." "It was her company too," Kira retorted. "And you were willing to risk it all for this. For us." The argument hung in the air, ugly and unresolved. The us that had felt so special and thrilling under the Maldivian sun was now revealed for what it was, a toxic cocktail of his ego and her ambition. Finally, on the third day, after dozens of failed calls, Conrad managed to get a line out to David Chen, his COO, and a man he'd considered one of his closest friends. The relief that flooded him upon hearing David's voice was immediate and overwhelming. "David, thank God, it's Conrad. Listen, I'm in serious trouble." He launched into a frantic, garbled explanation, the Maldives, the frozen accounts, Lorraine's episode. David's response was not the one he expected. There was no, "What can I do to help?" Instead, his voice was cautious, laced with a patronizing sympathy that made Conrad's skin crawl. "Whoa, Conrad, mate, just slow down. Take a breath. Lorraine called us. She told us you were under a lot of strain, that you'd snapped. We've all been so worried about you, man." "Worried, David, it's a lie. She's locked me out of everything." "Okay, pal, okay. Just focus on getting some rest. Don't worry about the company we're handling things here. The most important thing is for you to come home and get the help you need. Get the help you need? The phrase echoed in Conrad's ear. It was the masterstroke. Lorraine hadn't painted him as a villain. She'd painted him as a tragic, unstable figure. No one would wire money to a man having a mental breakdown. No one would take his side against his worried, pregnant wife. She hadn't just built a cage. She had convinced all his allies that it was a sanctuary for his own good. Desperation clawed at him. There was only one person who could undo this. He sent a pleading message through David, a final, desperate gambit. Tell her I need to talk to her. It's about the baby, our son. He hated himself for using his unborn child as bait, but he was out of moves. He spent hours waiting by the phone in Mr. Hassan's office, a supplicant under the manager's watchful gaze. Finally, it rang. Lorraine. He breathed his voice, a ragged mix of hope and dread. The voice that came back was as clear and cold as glacial ice. Conrad. Laurie, thank God. Listen, there's been a terrible, insane mistake. You've cut everything off. I'm trapped here. You have to call the banks. You have to fix this. There's no mistake, Conrad, she replied, each word a perfectly polished stone. This is not an error. This is a consequence. The word hung in the air between them. A consequence for what? A little trip. This is disproportionate. Lorraine, it's insane. No, she said. And he heard the shift in her voice from cold to dangerously sharp. I have finally found my sense of proportion. You are in the Maldives with your pregnant mistress on what you have the audacity to call a babymoon, while I am days away from giving birth to our son. You stood in our home, looked me in the eye, and you lied. You didn't just underestimate my intelligence, Conrad. You underestimated my worth. It's complicated. He stammered the words feeble, even to his own ears. It's remarkably simple. She cut him off, her voice like steel. You made a series of choices, and now I am making mine. Our financial empire was built on a foundation of mutual trust. You dynamited that foundation, so I have restructured our assets to protect myself, and more importantly, to protect my child's future. Your child, he sputtered, indignation rising. He's my son too, and those are my assets. A dead silence stretched over the line, a void of terrifying length. When she spoke again, her voice was low, almost conversational, and infinitely more menacing. You should be more concerned about your immediate problems, your hotel bill, for instance, and your passport. I was so worried when you stormed out that I felt compelled to report it stolen. Clearing that up from a foreign country with no money might be challenging. He felt the last of his strength drain away, leaving him hollow. She had anticipated everything. This wasn't an emotional outburst. This was an execution. Lorraine, please, he begged, all pretense of anger gone, replaced by pure animal fear. Don't do this. It's already done, she said softly. Then she twisted the knife. By the way, Conrad, my father's security consultant, a very thorough man, did a little digging into your KJ. He thought it prudent to check her network activity at Nexus Pay. It seems your girlfriend has been quite busy. Conrad's blood ran cold. He glanced over at Kira, who was watching him from the doorway of the office, her face pale. For the last 6 months, Lorraine continued, her voice as dispassionate as a newsreader's. She has been downloading proprietary source code, sensitive investor data, and our 5-year strategic plan. She's been sending it all to a shell account that my consultant traced back quite easily, I might add, to a venture capital firm. A firm run by Richard Kessler. Kessler, his nemesis, the rival who had been trying to gut his company for years. The name landed like a physical blow. Lorraine let the silence stretch, allowing the full implication to sink in. So you see, Conrad, your affair wasn't just a personal humiliation for me. You brought a corporate spy into our lives. You gave her access that compromised our entire company, the company that I am still a major shareholder in. She paused, then delivered the killing blow. The board will be very interested to hear about this. I imagine they'll have some questions for you, if you ever make it back. The line clicked dead. Conrad stood frozen, the silent receiver pressed to his ear. He was no longer just a cheating husband. He was a fool, a dupe, the architect of his own company's potential destruction, and the woman he had discarded had just become his judge, his jury, and his executioner. The silence that followed the dead phone line was more profound than any sound Conrad had ever heard. It was a vacuum pulling all the air, all the heat, all the arrogance from the room. He slowly, mechanically placed the receiver back into its cradle. The small plastic click echoed like a gunshot in his mind, the sound of a door slamming shut on his entire existence. He was staring into the abyss, and the abyss had a name: Lorraine. But as he turned his head, his gaze fell upon Kira Jensen, and he realized the abyss had multiple flaws. Lorraine's betrayal was a masterpiece of strategic warfare, an act of such cold, calculated brilliance that a part of him, even in his ruin, could almost admire it. It was a response to his own actions. But Kira's betrayal was of a different sort. It was parasitic. She hadn't just cheated on him. She had used him as a host, a tool, a stepping stone in a grubby little game of corporate espionage. He had handed her the keys to his kingdom, and she had been systematically selling off the crown jewels. He looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time. The doe-eyed adoration was gone, replaced by the raw, feral terror of a cornered animal. The curve of her belly, which he had once seen as a symbol of their secret, exciting future, now looked like a cancerous growth, a monument to his own spectacular stupidity. You, he whispered the word, a plume of toxic smoke. He felt no rage, only a vast, glacial emptiness. The whole time, every word, every touch, it was all a lie. Kira flinched, scrambling backward until her back hit the wall. The tears that streamed down her face were real now, born not of manipulation, but of pure panic. I had to. She sobbed the words, tumbling out in a desperate, pathetic rush. Richard Kessler. He promised me everything. He said you were a dinosaur, that Nexus Pay was a sinking ship. He promised me a senior position, a real future security. Security. Conrad's laugh started as a low tremor and erupted into a full-blown, unhinged cackle. It was the sound of a man breaking apart at the seams. Security. By committing federal crimes, by selling proprietary code, you absolute fool. You haven't secured a future. You've secured a federal indictment. You're finished. We're both finished. Mr. Hassan, who had stood by with the impassive professionalism of a mortician, finally stepped forward. He had overheard every word, his expression unchanging. Ms. Jensen, he stated, his voice as calm and unyielding as the tide. Given this new information and the fact that you are an accomplice in Mr. Beaumont's financial predicament at our resort, I'm afraid your position here is also untenable. Both of your passports will remain in our custody, pending further instructions. The shared prison cell of their staff quarters room became a new circle of hell. The air, already thick with the scent of industrial detergent from the nearby laundry, now crackled with silent loathing. They moved around each other like hostile ghosts in the cramped space, the memory of their intimacy a source of revulsion. Conrad would lie awake on his lumpy mattress, listening to the rhythmic churning of the giant washing machines, the sound a metronome counting down the seconds of his failure. He replayed every conversation, every flirtatious email, every late-night rendezvous with Kira, searching for the signs he had so blissfully ignored. They were all there, hiding in plain sight. He hadn't been seduced. He had been targeted. After 2 days marinating in this toxic silence, a sliver of his old self, the problem solver, the man of action, surfaced. He had to do something. He secured permission to use Mr. Hassan's office phone again, the manager watching him with weary resignation. His one remaining hope was the full might of the US government. He dialed the number for the US Embassy in Colombo, Sri Lanka. The faint crackle of the international line sounded like a lifeline. US Embassy Consular Section, how can I help you? The voice was flat, professional, bored. My name is Conrad Beaumont. He began trying to inject authority into his tone. I'm an American citizen, and I am being held against my will in the Maldives. Sir, are you in any physical danger? The officer asked a standard checklist question. No, not physical danger, but they've confiscated my passport. They won't let me leave. A pause. And why have they taken your passport, sir? Conrad's throat tightened. The words were humiliating to say out loud. It's a dispute over a hotel bill. I see, the officer said, and Conrad could practically hear him mentally filing this under rich idiot problems. Sir, that is a civil matter. The embassy cannot interfere in private financial disputes. Our official advice is to settle your bill. I can't. Conrad's voice cracked with desperation. That's the point. My accounts are frozen. My credit cards have been cancelled. My wife... Ah, yes. The officer cut in his voice, now taking on a new, cooler efficiency. We are aware of the situation with your passport, Mr. Beaumont. It has been flagged in the system. A lost or potentially stolen report was filed with the State Department from a precinct in New York City. Yes, that's what I'm telling you. It wasn't lost or stolen. My wife did that maliciously. Sir, that may be. However, until the reporting party officially retracts their report or the flag is cleared through an investigation, we cannot issue you an emergency travel document. The system simply won't allow it. You'll need to work with the reporting party, your wife, it seems, to resolve the issue. Conrad slammed the phone down. It was a perfect, inescapable trap, a bureaucratic Mobius strip designed by Lorraine. He couldn't pay the bill without access to money. He couldn't leave to get access to money without his passport. He couldn't get his passport without clearing the flag. And he couldn't clear the flag without the cooperation of the very person who had put him in this cage. He slumped into the chair, defeated. He was no longer Conrad Beaumont, Titan of Industry. He was case file number 734, a problem to be managed. His deliverance, when it came, was as humbling as his fall. The next afternoon, Mr. Hassan summoned him. The manager's expression was for the first time unreadable. Mr. Beaumont, we received an anonymous wire transfer moments ago for the full outstanding balance of your bill. A surge of adrenaline, of pure, unadulterated relief shot through Conrad. She was letting him go. She had made her point, and now she was letting him off the hook. Furthermore, Mr. Hassan continued sliding a single sheet of paper across his mahogany desk. A one-way ticket has been booked in your name. It is for a flight from Malé to New York, connecting through Dubai. It departs tomorrow morning at 6:05 a.m. He paused, letting the information sink in. It is an economy class ticket. The relief curdled into shame. This wasn't a reprieve. It was a leash. She was summoning him, but on her terms, stripping him of every last vestige of his former status. Your passport, Mr. Hassan added, will be handed to you by our representative at the check-in counter at Villana International Airport. You will not receive it before then. He looked Conrad squarely in the eye. The arrangements cover you and you alone. Ms. Jensen's situation remains unresolved. The journey home was a 22-hour pilgrimage of shame. At the airport, he was just another face in the swarming, chaotic crowd. He stood in the long, snaking security line, the press of humanity around him, a stark contrast to the sterile solitude of the private terminals he was used to. On the plane, he was wedged into a middle seat in row 42, his knees pressed against the seat in front of him, a crying baby behind him, and a man with a hacking cough beside him. The flight attendant handed him a plastic-wrapped tray of lukewarm chicken and rice, and he ate it because he was starving. Stripped of his phone, his watch, his wallet, he had nothing to do but think. The recycled air and the low drone of the engines became the soundtrack to his internal reckoning. He saw his life with Lorraine not as a marriage, but as a long-term investment she had made, one he had foolishly tried to liquidate. He had seen her intelligence as an asset to his company, but had forgotten it was an integral part of her being, a weapon she could wield with terrifying precision. His anger had evaporated, replaced by a cold, primal fear of the woman he had married. He landed at JFK, looking like a shipwreck survivor. Unshaven, hollow-eyed, his designer suit rumpled and stained. He hailed a yellow cab, the smell of stale coffee and cheap air freshener, an assault on his senses. As the taxi lurched through the familiar streets of Manhattan, everything looked different, as if he were seeing it through a distorted lens. The doorman at his building, a man to whom he had handed a $1,000 bill every Christmas, met his eye with a flicker of recognition, followed by a deep, profound pity that was more insulting than any contempt. The elevator ride up was silent. The penthouse door opening into a cavern of echoes. The place was sterilized. All of Lorraine's personal touches were gone. Her collection of first-edition novels, the abstract art she'd chosen for the foyer, the silver-framed photos of their wedding, their travels, their life. All gone. He walked numbly through the vast space until he reached the nursery. The door was ajar. He pushed it open, and his breath caught in his throat. It was utterly bare. The hand-painted mural of the night sky was gone, painted over in a stark, clinical white. The crib, the changing table, the rocking chair, where he had once imagined himself reading to his son, all had vanished. It was an erasure, a statement that the future he had betrayed would never come to pass. On the cold marble of the kitchen island, stark against the grey stone, lay a single thick manila envelope. His name was typed on the front. His hands, clumsy and trembling, fumbled with the clasp. Inside the papers were cool and heavy. Legal documents. The top one was a petition for divorce citing infidelity and moral turpitude. Beneath that, a temporary restraining order, a legal wall keeping him 500 feet from Lorraine and her father's estate in Connecticut. And under that, a formal notice of an emergency meeting of the Board of Directors of Nexus Pay, its purpose, stated in cold corporate language, to discuss the immediate removal of CEO Conrad Beaumont for gross negligence and breach of fiduciary duty. He felt the floor tilt. Tucked inside the sheaf of divorce papers was one final sheet. It was not a legal document, but a piece of thick cream-colored stationery. Her elegant cursive handwriting was the final precise incision. Conrad. By now you understand. The board meeting is tomorrow at 10 a.m. I suggest you attend. They are prepared to vote you out of the company you founded, with cause stripping you of your severance and a significant portion of your remaining stock options. They have copies of Kira's emails and a signed affidavit from her, secured by my father's lawyers, in exchange for leniency in her own legal troubles. There is, however, another option. I am exercising my right as a co-founder and major shareholder to take over as interim CEO. If you agree to my terms, a swift, uncontested divorce, a full transfer of the family trust and the New York property to me, and your complete and permanent resignation from Nexus Pay, I will ensure you walk away with a small percentage of your original stock. Enough to live comfortably, but not enough to ever hurt anyone on this scale again. This is not a negotiation. This is the new reality. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to have your lawyer contact mine with your acceptance. William Arthur Davenport was born 2 days ago. He is healthy and he is beautiful. You will not be a part of his life. He deserves a better role model. Lorraine. The papers slipped from his numb fingers, scattering across the floor like dead leaves. William Arthur Davenport. Her name. Her father's name. His son branded with the sigil of the dynasty that had crushed him. He didn't just sink to the floor. He collapsed the strength, leaving his bones, the world narrowing to a single point of blinding absolute defeat. He was a king with no kingdom, a father with no son, a man with no name but the one he had disgraced. He was alone in his empty palace, a ghost in the ruins he himself had created. And so Conrad Beaumont's gilded world came crashing down, not with a bang, but with the quiet, calculated click of a woman reclaiming her power. This wasn't just a story of infidelity. It was a masterclass in consequences. Lorraine Davenport proved that the quietest person in the room is often the most dangerous when pushed too far. She didn't just get mad. She got strategic. She used the very tools of the empire she helped build to dismantle the king who betrayed her, securing a future for herself and her child, not as a victim, but as a victor. It's a chilling reminder that hell hath no fury, like a brilliant woman scorned. What do you think? Was Lorraine's revenge justified, or did she go too far? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What happens when a lie is more powerful than a heartbeat? For Isabel Sterling, her husband's name was a shield, a promise of a perfect life carved in gold and whispered in the most exclusive circles of London. She had the mansion, the glamour, and the one thing she'd always dreamed of: a child growing within her, a true heir to the Sterling fortune. But in the shadows of their perfect world, a venomous whisper was taking root. A mistress, a lie about a phantom pregnancy, and a husband blinded by betrayal. This isn't a story about a simple affair. It's the story of how a millionaire, in a single devastating act, chose to believe a calculated deception and threw his genuinely pregnant wife out into the cold, unforgiving night. Prepare yourselves, because the truth is always more shocking than the lie. The Sterling residence, a palatial white stucco mansion overlooking Regent's Park, was less a home and more a monument to Damien Sterling's success. Its gardens were meticulously sculpted. Its windows gleamed like polished diamonds, and inside the air itself seemed to hum with the quiet, confident thrum of immense wealth. Damien, at 34, was the architect of this empire, the CEO of Sterling Innovations, a tech conglomerate that had disrupted global logistics. He was sharp, decisive, and possessed a charisma that could command a boardroom or charm a princess with equal ease. His wife Isabel was the mansion soul. She was not the product of a corporate merger or a social climbing family. She was a former art historian whose quiet intelligence and gentle grace had captivated Damien 5 years prior. She moved through the cavernous rooms not as a conqueror, but as a caretaker, replacing the coldness of marble with the warmth of fresh flowers and the echo of a kind word to the staff. To the outside world, they were the perfect couple, power and grace, ambition and heart. For weeks, Isabel had been holding a secret, a precious, fragile thing she kept wrapped in silent joy. She was pregnant. After 2 years of quiet hope and hushed disappointments, the confirmation from her doctor felt like the sun breaking through a perpetual fog. She planned to tell Damien on their anniversary, to present him with a tiny pair of hand-knitted booties she'd hidden in her wardrobe, a tangible promise of the future he claimed he wanted. The first tremor in her perfect world was subtle, a name spoken with a little too much frequency. Chloe Vance. Chloe closed the Hong Kong deal, Damien would announce over dinner, his eyes fixed on his phone. She's a killer, absolutely ruthless. Chloe reorganized the PR division. The board is thrilled, he'd mention as they dressed for a gala. She thinks 3 steps ahead of everyone. Isabel pictured this Chloe as a sharp-shouldered, severe woman in a power suit. She felt a prickle of professional admiration for her, a woman succeeding in her husband's cutthroat world. She never imagined her as a threat, because in Isabel's world, love and loyalty were the bedrock upon which everything else was built. The first time she met Chloe was at a company charity gala held at the Victoria and Albert Museum. Isabel, radiant in a deep sapphire gown that subtly disguised the very beginnings of her new secret, was standing by Damien's side. He was mid-flow describing a new AI venture to a cluster of investors when a woman glided up to them. She wasn't severe at all. Chloe Vance was stunning with a mane of fiery red hair, eyes the color of jade, and a smile that was both dazzling and predatory. She wore a backless emerald dress that seemed poured onto her statuesque frame. "Isabel, darling," Damien said, turning with a brilliant smile. "This is the miracle worker I've been telling you about. Chloe Vance. Chloe, my wife, Isabel." Chloe's eyes swept over Isabel in a fraction of a second, a flicker of assessment that was so quick Isabel almost missed it. But she didn't. It was the way a predator sizes up its prey. "It is an absolute honor to finally meet you." Chloe purred, her voice a low, husky melody. She extended a hand, her long crimson nails brushing against Isabel's skin. "Damien speaks so highly of you. He says you're his anchor." The word anchor sounded less like a compliment and more like a weight. Isabel smiled graciously, a lifetime of decorum kicking in. "It's lovely to meet you too, Chloe. Damien is very proud of the work you're doing." Throughout the evening, Isabel watched her. Chloe was a master of her craft. She orbited Damien, never too close, never too far. She'd lean in to whisper a comment, her hand briefly touching his arm. She would laugh at his jokes with a fervor that felt just a little too practiced. To everyone else, she was the perfect deferential employee. To Isabel, a cold knot of dread began to tighten in her stomach. It was a feeling she couldn't name, an intuition she couldn't prove. Later that week, the dread was given a name. Damien came home late, smelling of expensive whiskey and a faint, unfamiliar perfume, a heady scent of jasmine and spice. He was tired, he said, a brutal day of negotiations. As he took off his jacket, Something small and silver fell from his pocket, clattering onto the marble floor of their dressing room. Isabel bent down to pick it up. It was a single earring, a delicate modern design of a silver serpent. She'd seen its twin dangling from Chloe Vance's ear at the gala. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She held it up. "Damien, what is this?" He glanced at it, his expression unreadable. "Oh, that must be Chloe's. We were all working late in the conference room. She must have dropped it. I'll have my assistant return it tomorrow." His explanation was smooth, plausible, but the ease with which he said it, the lack of surprise, sent a shard of ice through Isabel's veins. He didn't meet her eyes. He just walked into the shower, leaving her standing there, the silver serpent feeling like a brand in her palm, its cold metal a stark contrast to the warm, living secret she held in her womb. The lie had been born, and Isabel, standing in her gilded cage, was about to find out how easily its golden bars could be bent into a weapon. The discovery of the earring shifted the atmosphere in the Sterling mansion from one of quiet luxury to one of tense, unspoken suspicion. Isabel tried to dismiss it, to tell herself she was being paranoid, hormonal even. But the seed of doubt, once planted, began to sprout insidious roots. Chloe's name was no longer just a mention of professional success. It became a constant, invasive presence. Damien's phone, once left casually on the nightstand, was now perpetually screen down. He had emergency late-night calls that required him to step out onto the balcony, his voice a low, urgent murmur carried away by the London wind. Business trips to Zurich and Singapore were added to his calendar at the last minute, trips Chloe was also coincidentally required to attend. Chloe, for her part, began a campaign of subtle, psychological warfare. One afternoon, a bouquet of exotic blood-red orchids arrived at the house. The card, in a flamboyant script, read, "To the Sterling home, a little something to brighten the place up. We all work so hard to keep it running. CV." It was a power play disguised as a gift, a declaration that she too was a pillar of Damien's world. Isabel quietly told the housekeeper to put them in a distant guest room. The gaslighting was masterful. When Isabel, her voice trembling slightly, asked Damien why he was so distant, he would look at her with feigned concern. "Distant, darling. I'm closing the biggest merger of my career. I'm under immense pressure. I need your support, not accusations." When she mentioned the constant texts he received at all hours, he sighed with exasperation. "It's a global business, Isabel. It's 9 a.m. in Tokyo. Do you want me to just switch off? Chloe is managing the Asian markets for me. She has to keep me updated." He made her feel needy, paranoid, and worst of all, ungrateful. He was building an empire for them, he insisted. Why couldn't she see that meanwhile, Isabel's pregnancy was progressing? Morning sickness became a daily reality, a wave of nausea that she had to hide, attributing it to a migraine or a bad oyster. She hadn't yet told Damien. The perfect, joyful moment she had envisioned was gone, replaced by a gnawing anxiety. How could she bring a child into a home where its own mother felt like an intruder? The breaking point came during a weekend they were meant to spend at their country estate in the Cotswolds. It was their anniversary. Isabel had packed the tiny booties, determined to reclaim their relationship, to remind him of the life they had promised to build together. On Friday afternoon, as she was about to call their driver, Damien walked into the library, his face a mask of regret. "Darling, I'm so sorry." He began, the words already sounding hollow. "Something's come up. A massive server breach at the Frankfurt office. It's all hands on deck. I have to fly out tonight." Isabel's heart sank. "Tonight, Damien? It's our anniversary weekend. I know, and I feel terrible. Believe me, I'd rather be with you. He walked over and kissed her forehead, a gesture that felt more like a formality than an act of affection. Chloe is already at the airport, sorting out the logistics with the German team. I have to go. The casual mention of her name was like a slap. Of course, Chloe is there. Damien's eyes hardened. What is that supposed to mean? She's my senior VP. Her job is to handle crises. Are we really going to do this again, Isabel? Right now. Defeated. She just shook her head. No, go. Save your company. He left. The house fell silent, vast and empty. That evening, Isabel sat alone in their cavernous dining room, the chef's celebratory meal untouched. She scrolled through her phone, a masochistic impulse guiding her fingers to a popular high society Instagram blog. And there it was, a spotted post. A grainy photo taken within the last hour from inside the exclusive private terminal at Heathrow. It showed two figures boarding a private jet. Damien, his arm casually draped around the shoulders of a woman with unmistakable fiery red hair. They were laughing. The caption read, "Tech mogul Damien Sterling and a mystery redhead off for a romantic getaway. Looks like business is booming." The phone slipped from her numb fingers and clattered onto the table. There was no server breach in Frankfurt. The only thing in crisis was her marriage, the Cotswolds, their anniversary, their future. It was all a lie to facilitate a weekend away with his mistress. A wave of nausea more violent than any morning sickness washed over her. But this time it was followed by a walled-hard clarity. The intuition she'd tried to suppress, the whispers she'd tried to ignore. It was all real. She was not paranoid. She was being played for a fool. She walked upstairs, her steps heavy, with a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight. She opened her wardrobe and took out the small, beautifully wrapped box. She untied the silk ribbon and lifted the lid. The tiny cream-colored booties lay nestled in tissue paper, a symbol of a future that now felt like a cruel joke. Tears finally streamed down her face, hot and silent. She was alone in a house that no longer felt like a home, pregnant with the child of a man who was at that very moment in the arms of another woman. The serpent's whisper had become a roar, and it had devoured her world whole. Damien returned from his crisis in Frankfurt, looking refreshed and triumphant. He presented Isabel with an expensive diamond bracelet from a boutique in Geneva, a guilt offering she accepted with a quiet, hollow thank you. She said nothing of the photo. Confronting him felt futile. She was gathering her thoughts, trying to figure out what to do, not just for herself, but for the tiny life she was carrying. She needed a plan, not a screaming match. Her silence, however, was misinterpreted by Damien as acquiescence. To him, the storm had passed. For Chloe, it was the perfect opportunity to launch her final, devastating assault. The attack came on a Tuesday evening. Damien was home, a rarity. They were having a tense, mostly silent dinner when his phone buzzed. It was a text. He glanced at it, and the color drained from his face. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. "I have to go out," he said, his voice strained. "Another crisis?" Isabel asked, her tone flat. "Yes. Something personal. I'll be back later." He was gone before she could say another word. He didn't come home until 3 a.m. He looked shattered, his suit rumpled, his face etched with a mixture of horror and something else. A grim, conflicted responsibility. He found Isabel waiting up for him in their bedroom, a book lying unread in her lap. He didn't apologize for the hour. He just stood at the foot of the bed and said the words that would detonate their lives. "It's Chloe," he said, his voice raspy. "Isabel. She's pregnant." The world tilted on its axis. Isabel stared at him, sure she had misheard. "What? She's pregnant?" he repeated, running a hand through his hair distractedly. "She told me tonight. She's about 8 weeks along. She's terrified. She didn't want to tell me. She didn't want to ruin this." He gestured vaguely at the opulent room at their life. Isabel felt a hysterical laugh bubble in her chest, but it came out as a strangled gasp. "She's pregnant. After your business trip to Frankfurt." It happened before that. He snapped, his guilt manifesting as anger. "It was a mistake. A couple of times after we worked late. It was meaningless, Isabel, I swear. It just happened. A meaningless mistake now has a heartbeat, apparently." She shot back, the sarcasm dripping with pain. Damien flinched. He started pacing, the frantic energy of a trapped animal. She was going to handle it on her own. She never wanted to be a problem, but she had a scare tonight, some cramping. She went to the hospital. Everything is okay, but the doctor, it made it all real for her. She broke down. She felt she had to tell me. Every word was a carefully rehearsed line fed to him by a master manipulator. Chloe had laid the perfect trap. The scare, the reluctance, the breakdown. It was all designed to make him feel like her protector, to paint her as a tragic, vulnerable victim. And then Chloe delivered her masterpiece of deception. The next day, Damien sat Isabel down in their sunroom, a place where they used to read the Sunday papers together. He looked like a judge about to deliver a death sentence. "Chloe wanted you to see this," he said, sliding a photograph across the glass table. "She wants to be transparent." Isabel picked it up. It was a sonogram, a grainy black and white image of a tiny bean-shaped fetus. The top corner of the printout had a name, C. Vance, and a date from the previous evening. Isabel stared at it. Her own first sonogram picture was tucked away in her bedside table drawer. It looked so similar. It was the universal image of early life. But this one felt like a forgery, a desecration. It was a lie printed on thermal paper. Chloe had likely downloaded a stock image from the internet and paid a graphic designer a paltry sum to Photoshop her name onto it. It was a simple, brutally effective deception. "She feels terrible about this, Damien said, using her old pet name, a desperate attempt to soften the blow. "She knows she's destroyed everything. She even suggested she could go away, have the baby somewhere else, and I could support them from a distance." The calculated magnanimity of the offer was Chloe's checkmate. It made her seem noble, self-sacrificing. It was designed to make Damien say what he said next. "But I can't do that," he said, his jaw tight. "I can't let my child grow up without a father. I caused this. I have to take responsibility." Isabel looked from the fake sonogram to her husband's tormented face. He was completely ensnared. Chloe hadn't just seduced him. She had colonized his conscience. He saw himself as a man of honor, forced to do the right thing in a terrible situation. He didn't see the puppeteer pulling his strings. She felt a sudden, profound calm. The shock had given way to a chilling resolve. The game was no longer about saving her marriage. It was about survival. "And what does taking responsibility look like, Damien?" she asked, her voice steady, devoid of the tears he expected. He looked at her, and for the first time she saw the cold, hard calculation in his eyes. The CEO was back. He was managing a crisis, and she was now a liability. "I don't know yet," he said. But things are going to have to change. Isabel knew exactly what that meant. The phantom pregnancy had done its work. It had created a phantom heir, and in the sterling empire, there was only room for one. The days that followed were a cold war fought in the silent, opulent corridors of the mansion. Damien treated Isabel with a detached, clinical politeness that was more chilling than any argument. He was an executive managing a hostile takeover of his own life, and she was the asset being liquidated. He had lawyers on the phone at all hours, their hushed conversations about settlements and non-disclosure agreements drifting from his study. Chloe, meanwhile, was nowhere and everywhere. She didn't come to the house, but her presence was a toxic miasma. There were florist deliveries of funereal white lilies, Chloe's favorite, and calls that Damien would take with a pained, "I'm with Isabel right now. I'll call you back," a performance of sensitivity that was purely for his own benefit. Isabel knew her time was running out. The lie was solidifying, hardening into an accepted truth in Damien's mind. Her own truth, her own secret, felt fragile and powerless against it. She had to tell him. It was her last desperate card to play. She chose a Thursday night. A storm was brewing over London, the sky a bruised purple. The dramatic fallacy was not lost on her. She found Damien in his study, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, staring out at the city lights. "Damien, we need to talk," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Not with lawyers, not about settlements. About us." He turned his face weary. "Isabel, there's nothing left to say. My lawyers will be in touch with yours. I will be generous. You will be comfortable for the rest of your life." "I don't want your money," she said, stepping closer. "I want my husband, the man I married, the man who would never believe a lie like this." "A lie?" He let out a short, bitter laugh. "I've seen the sonogram, Isabel. I was with her at the hospital. This is real." "The hospital you took her to after she called you with her scare," Isabel countered. "Did you sit in the examination room with her? Did you speak to the doctor yourself? Or did you wait in the hallway while she crafted her story?" He faltered for a second, a flicker of doubt in his eyes before it was extinguished by his own guilt. "Stop it. You're just trying to twist this." "No," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I'm trying to tell you the truth. Chloe is not the only one with news, Damien." This was it. She took a deep breath, her hand instinctively going to her still flat stomach. "I'm pregnant, Damien." The words hung in the air between them. The only sound was the distant rumble of thunder. Damien stared at her, his expression slowly shifting from weary frustration to cold, disbelieving fury. "What did you just say?" he whispered. "I'm pregnant," she repeated, her voice gaining strength. "I'm 12 weeks along. I was going to tell you on our anniversary before all this. I have the doctor's report. I have my own sonogram." She saw the flicker of hope in his eyes, a desperate desire to believe her. But Chloe's poison had seeped too deep. The lie was a fortress, and her truth was a pebble thrown against its walls. He shook his head slowly, a cruel, pitying smile twisting his lips. "Wow. I have to hand it to you, Isabel. That's quite a move. Desperate, but clever." The condescension in his voice stole her breath. "Move? You think this is a move? This is our child, Damien. Our child!" he roared, his control finally snapping. He slammed his glass down on the desk, whiskey sloshing over the polished wood. "Don't you dare! Don't you dare use that to try and trap me. Chloe gets pregnant by accident, and you suddenly, miraculously, are pregnant too. What a coincidence. Did you run out and fake a sonogram this afternoon after my lawyer called? The accusation was so vile, so far beyond the pale, that Isabel felt a wave of dizziness. He was comparing her to Chloe, accusing her of the very deception she was a victim of. "How dare you?" she whispered, tears of rage and heartbreak finally spilling down her cheeks. "I have loved you. I have stood by you. And you stand there and accuse me of something so monstrous. I'm accusing you of being a liar," he shouted, his face contorted. Chloe, for all her faults, was honest with me. She was terrified, but she told the truth. You're trying to fight her, lie with a bigger lie, and I won't have it. The thunder cracked directly overhead, and the heavens opened. Rain began to lash against the window panes, a torrent of nature's fury mirroring the destruction inside. "I want you out," Damien said, his voice dropping to a low, lethal command. "I want you out of this house. Tonight." "What?" Isabel gasped, stumbling back. "Damien. No, it's pouring with rain. Where would I go?" "I don't care," he said, his eyes as cold and hard as granite. He turned his back on her, staring out at the storm. "Go to a hotel. Go to your parents. Go to hell for all I care. Just get out of my sight. My security team will escort you. Pack a bag. You have 30 minutes. He didn't look at her again. The finality in his voice was absolute. There was no appeal, no reprieve. The man who had vowed to love and protect her was casting her out into a storm, believing she was a liar and a fraud. Numbly, Isabel walked out of the study and up the grand staircase. Two stoic men in dark suits, members of Damien's personal security detail, were already waiting in the hallway. They watched her with impassive eyes as she walked into her bedroom and pulled out a suitcase. She packed mechanically a few clothes, her toiletries the file from her obstetrician, containing the proof of her pregnancy, and the small box with the baby booties. She was weeping, but her sobs were silent, her body shaking with a grief too profound for sound. 30 minutes later, she was standing at the grand entrance of her home. One of the security guards held an umbrella over her. The other had placed her single suitcase on the rain-slicked driveway. Damien was nowhere to be seen. He hadn't even afforded her the decency of a final glance. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind her, the sound echoing with terrifying finality. She was Isabel Sterling no more. She was just a woman alone in the rain with a broken heart and a secret child that her own husband refused to believe was real. As she stood there shivering in the deluge, she made a vow. She would not break. She would survive this. And she would bring her child into the world, a world far away from the poisonous lies of the House of Sterling. The taxi's headlights cut through the relentless curtain of rain, the wipers fighting a losing battle. Isabel gave the driver the only address that came to mind, a small flat in Camden. It was a world away from Regent's Park, a world of brick facades, bustling markets, and the comforting anonymity of ordinary life. It was the home of Maria Flores, her closest friend. Maria, a fiery and fiercely loyal journalist, whom Isabel had known since university, opened the door in her pajamas, her eyes widening in shock at the sight of her drenched, heart-broken friend standing on her doorstep with a single suitcase. "Izzy, my God, what happened?" The dam of Isabel's composure broke. In the warmth of Maria's tiny living room, surrounded by stacks of books and the smell of brewed coffee, She collapsed into her friend's arms and told her everything. The affair, the lies, the phantom pregnancy, the sonogram, and finally the brutal expulsion. When she finished, her voice raw, Maria was radiating a cold fury. That monster. I'm going to write an exposé that will strip him bare. Sterling innovations will be sterling in ruins when I'm done with him. No, Isabel whispered, wiping her eyes. Not yet. A public fight is what he understands. It's what Chloe would do. I can't think about that now. Then, taking a shaky breath, she revealed the one part of the story that mattered most. He kicked me out because he thinks I lied to trap him. Maria, I'm pregnant. For real. Maria's anger instantly melted into profound concern. She pulled Isabel into another hug, this one fiercely protective. Okay, she said, her voice firm. Okay, this changes everything. Forget him. Forget the mansion and the money. This is about you and this baby now. You're safe here. This is your home. The days that followed blurred into a haze of grief and adjustment. The opulence of her former life was stripped away, replaced by the humble reality of Maria's flat. The king-sized bed was replaced by a pull-out sofa. The walk-in closet became a small corner of Maria's wardrobe. The personal chef was replaced by takeout cartons, and Maria's well-intentioned but often burnt attempts at cooking. Yet in this small space, Isabel found something she hadn't had in the mansion for months: safety. She spent the first week in a fog, but Maria was a relentless force of nature. She made sure Isabel ate, forced her on walks through Camden Market, and steadfastly refused to let her drown in sorrow. One morning, Maria came home from a meeting and threw a file onto the coffee table. Right. First things first. We need to secure you. I called in a favor with a friend who works in family law. She's the best. We need to document everything. Your pregnancy, his assets, Chloe's ridiculously transparent lies. We fight him with facts, Izzy, not with tears. The lawyer, a sharp, empathetic woman named Anya, met with Isabel the next day. For the first time, Isabel laid out her proof. Her doctor's reports. Her own sonogram, dated weeks before Chloe's supposed revelation. A timeline of Damien's business trips. Anya listened, her expression growing more resolute with every word. He hasn't just abandoned his pregnant wife, Anya stated, her voice grim. He has inflicted extreme emotional distress based on a provable fraud. Isabel, when you're ready, we can make him pay for this. But for now, your health and the baby's health are the priority. The process of disentanglement was brutal. Damien's lawyers sent over a settlement offer. It was, as he promised, generous, a lump sum that would keep her in luxury for life, contingent on her signing an ironclad NDA that would prevent her from ever speaking about Damien Chloe or the circumstances of their separation. It was hush money designed to erase her from his history. Looking at the document, something inside Isabel hardened. The soft, forgiving woman who had curated art and arranged flowers was being forged into something new in the fires of her betrayal. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about her child, a child Damien had disowned based on a lie. I'm not signing it, she told Anya. Are you sure? Anya asked gently. It's a lot of money, Isabel. Security. It's not security, it's a gag, Isabel replied, her voice clear and firm. He doesn't get to buy my silence. He doesn't get to erase his child, reject the offer, all of it. She began to build a new life, a small and quiet one. She used the last of her personal savings money from before her marriage to pay her way. She found a new obstetrician in her neighborhood, a kind, motherly woman who knew nothing of the sterling name, and simply called her Isabel. Hearing her own name unburdened by his felt like a quiet liberation. She and Maria would talk late into the night. Maria, the journalist, was convinced Chloe's lie had a fatal flaw. "Pregnancies have a deadline, Izzy. 9 months. What's her plan?" A convenient miscarriage in a few months. A premature birth of a doll. The lie is unsustainable. We just have to wait for it to collapse. As her own belly began to show a small, definite curve replacing the flat stomach of her past, Isabel's resolve solidified into steel. Every flutter she felt inside her was a reminder of her truth. Damien could have his empire, his mistress, and his lie. She had something infinitely more real. One afternoon, while walking by a small park, she saw a father pushing his daughter on a swing. The girl's laughter echoed in the crisp autumn air. A pang of sorrow hit her, a vision of the family she was supposed to have. But then she placed a hand on her stomach. The sorrow was quickly replaced by a fierce, primal protectiveness. She would be that father and that mother. She would be enough. The world had taken her husband, her home, and her name. It could not take her strength. It could not take her child. While Isabel was building a new life from the ashes of her old one, Chloe Vance was living a fantasy. She had moved into the Sterling mansion, a triumphant conqueror. She wore Isabel's robes, hosted dinner parties with Damien's business associates, and played the part of the tragic, glowing mother-to-be to perfection. She complained of morning sickness, though the staff noticed she had a hearty appetite in private. She redecorated what was to be the nursery in bold, garish colors that grated on the mansion's quiet elegance. She carried her fake sonogram picture in her wallet, ready to whip it out at the slightest provocation. Damien, consumed by guilt and a desperate need to do the right thing, catered to her every whim. He bought her extravagant gifts, hired a personal nutritionist, and spoke about their child with a forced, almost frantic enthusiasm. But beneath the surface, a seed of unease was beginning to sprout in his own mind. He had loved Isabel's quiet strength and intelligence. Chloe's constant drama and insatiable need for attention were beginning to wear on him. The first major crack in Chloe's story appeared via an unlikely source, Damien's mother, Eleanor Sterling. Eleanor was a formidable woman, old money personified. She was shrewd, observant, and had never been particularly fond of Chloe's naked ambition. She had adored Isabel. When Damien told her his version of the story that Isabel had lied about a pregnancy to trap him after he'd honorably confessed to fathering Chloe's child, Eleanor had remained silent, her expression unreadable. She invited Damien and a delicately conditioned Chloe to Sunday lunch at Claridge's, her preferred bastion of tradition and discretion. The lunch was a masterclass in subtle interrogation. "You must be so thrilled, Chloe." Eleanor began, her diamond earrings glittering. "A first grandchild is such a blessing. Have you chosen a hospital? I have an excellent man on Harley Street. He delivered all the royal babies you know." Chloe, momentarily flustered, replied, "Oh, we have someone. A wonderful doctor. Very private." "Of course," Eleanor said smoothly. "And the morning sickness, you poor dear. Is it dreadful? Awful?" Chloe sighed, placing a hand on her perfectly flat stomach. "I can barely keep anything down." She then proceeded to order the lobster thermidor and a side of truffle fries. Eleanor's gaze sharpened. Later, as they were leaving, Eleanor took Damien's arm. "She seems remarkably robust for someone so afflicted," she commented dryly. "And for someone supposedly 4 months pregnant, she doesn't seem to have told her tailor. That dress is this season's couture, and it's a perfect sample size." Damien dismissed it as his mother's typical frostiness, but the comment lingered. The lie began to truly unravel a month later. Chloe knew she was approaching the point where her pregnancy would have to become visually obvious. She started stuffing small cushions under her clothes, a clumsy attempt to create a baby bump. The effect was lumpy and unconvincing. The household staff, loyal to the memory of Isabel's kindness, began to whisper. The fatal mistake came from Chloe's own arrogance. Convinced she had everyone fooled, she became careless. She needed a dramatic event, something to cement her status and perhaps rush a wedding. She decided to stage a tragic miscarriage. One evening she called Damien in a panic. "The cramping is back. It's bad. Damien, really bad." He rushed home to find her collapsed at the bottom of the grand staircase, weeping hysterically. I think I'm losing the baby," she sobbed. He scooped her up and raced her to the hospital, the one she had pre-selected. After a frantic hour in the waiting room, a grim-faced Chloe emerged with a doctor who delivered the devastating news that they had lost the baby. Damien was genuinely heartbroken. The phantom child had become real in his mind, a symbol of his mistake and his chance at redemption. He held a weeping Chloe, comforting her, feeling the weight of the tragedy. But Eleanor Sterling was not heartbroken. She was suspicious. A fall down the stairs. A convenient miscarriage, just as the pregnancy should have been showing. It was all too theatrical, too neat. Without telling Damien, she made a phone call. The next day, a discreet private investigator, a former MI6 agent she kept on retainer for family matters, began to look into one Chloe Vance. The results came back a week later in a slim, devastating file. The PI had been thorough. The hospital Chloe had gone to for her initial scare had no record of a Chloe Vance being admitted for pregnancy-related issues that night. She had simply walked into the A&E, complained of stomach pain, and left an hour later. The doctor who had delivered the news of the miscarriage was not an OB-GYN. He was a junior resident in dermatology, who it turned out was Chloe's cousin. The PI had tracked down the graphic designer, who for $200 had expertly photoshopped Chloe's name and a date onto a stock sonogram image she'd downloaded from the internet. Most damning of all, the investigator had accessed flight manifests. The emergency trip to Frankfurt, the private jet had not flown to Germany. Its flight plan, paid for on Damien's corporate account, was a round trip to the Maldives. Eleanor read the report in her silent, sunlit drawing room, her tea growing cold. The sheer audacity, the cold-blooded cruelty of the deception was breathtaking. That evening, she summoned Damien to her townhouse. She didn't speak. She simply handed him the file. He read it, his face turning from confusion to disbelief, then to a sickening ashen white. He saw the flight plan to the Maldives, a romantic trip disguised as a work crisis. He saw the invoice from the graphic designer for the ultrasound. He saw the interview with the dermatologist cousin. The entire edifice of his new life, built on a foundation of guilt and honor, crumbled into dust. He wasn't the protector of a wronged woman. He was the gullible fool in a con artist's masterpiece. The lie about Chloe's pregnancy was exposed. And in that horrifying moment of clarity, a far more terrible truth crashed down on him. With the force of a physical blow, Isabel had been telling the truth. He had thrown his own pregnant wife, the woman who had only ever loved him, out into the night. He had called her a liar, a manipulator, and had abandoned her and their unborn child based on a cheap, cruel fiction. The weight of his own monstrous actions crushed him. He sank into a chair, the file slipping from his nerveless fingers, the sound of his own ragged breath filling the silent room. He had lost everything, and it was no one's fault but his own. The drive back to the Regent's Park mansion was a blur of self-loathing for Damien. Every street lamp illuminated his foolishness. Every shadow seemed to mock his blindness. He walked into the house not as its master, but as a man returning to the scene of a terrible crime. He found Chloe in the drawing room, sipping champagne and flipping through a catalogue of ridiculously expensive baby furniture, a macabre postscript to her fabricated tragedy. She was playing the part of the grieving mother, but her eyes held a spark of triumph. She believed she was now unassailable, permanently bonded to him through their shared loss. "Darling," she began, a pout on her lips. "I was thinking maybe for the nursery, even though it would be nice to have it ready for when we try again." Damien looked at her. Truly looked at her for the first time, without the filter of guilt. He saw the greed in her eyes, the hard, calculating lines of her face. He saw the predator, and he felt nothing but disgust. He tossed the investigator's file onto the coffee table in front of her. It landed with a heavy thud. "Frankfurt, Chloe?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Or was the weather better in the Maldives?" Chloe froze the champagne flute halfway to her lips. Her eyes darted to the file, and the color drained from her face. She knew instantly that the game was over. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, her voice losing its sultry confidence. "Oh, I think you do." Damien continued, the fury building in him cold and precise. "I think you know all about the graphic designer you paid to fake a sonogram. You know about your dermatologist cousin at the hospital. You know that you were never, ever pregnant." He leaned, in his voice a venomous whisper. "You played me. You destroyed my marriage, my life, based on a lie. You let me throw my wife, my pregnant wife, out of her home." Chloe's composure shattered. The mask of sophistication fell away to reveal a desperate, cornered creature. "I did it because I love you," she shrieked, her voice shrill. "She didn't appreciate you. She was an anchor holding you back. I was trying to set you free. Love." Damien laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "You don't know the meaning of the word. You love my name, my money. You saw a life you wanted, and you decided to burn down anyone who stood in your way." He stood up straight. "Get out." "What?" she gasped. "Get your things, everything you came with, nothing more. My security will watch you pack. I want you out of this house, out of my company, and out of my life within the hour. If I ever see your face or hear your name again, I will release this file to every news outlet in the country. I will sue you for fraud. I will destroy you so completely you won't be able to get a job cleaning toilets. Now get out." Her face contorted in a mask of pure hatred. She scrambled from the room. Damien was left alone, standing in the silent monument to his own stupidity. The victory was ashes in his mouth. Getting rid of Chloe was easy. The real reckoning was yet to come. His first frantic call was to Isabel's parents. They informed him in glacial tones that they had not heard from their daughter since the day she left him, and had no idea where she was. His next calls were to her old friends, the few whose numbers he had. They either hung up on him or told him they had no intention of helping him. He was a pariah. He had been so insulated in his world of wealth, he had no idea how to find a person who didn't want to be found. He hired his own private investigator, a different one with a single desperate instruction. Find Isabel. For weeks, there was nothing. It was as if she had vanished from the face of the earth. Damien lived in a state of torment, haunted by the memory of her face, as he'd accused her of lying. He wandered the empty rooms of the mansion, each one a testament to her absence. He saw her ghost everywhere in the garden she had loved, in the library, where she used to read, in the curve of the staircase where Chloe had staged her pathetic drama. Then, after nearly a month of searching, the investigator called. "I've found her." Damien's heart leapt. "Where is she? Is she okay? Well, she's not in London," the investigator said carefully. "She's in a small coastal town in Cornwall, Porthleven. She's been living a very quiet life." There was a pause. "There's something else you should know, Mr. Sterling. It seems she's not alone." "What do you mean?" Damien asked, a new cold dread creeping in. "Is she with someone, in a manner of speaking?" the investigator replied. "According to my local sources, she suffered a health scare about a month ago, some complication with the pregnancy. She was helped by a local GP, a Dr. Ben Carter. He's been looking after her since. They've become close. He's a widower, a very respected man in the community. People see them walking on the beach together. He's very protective of her." The image crashed into Damien's mind with the force of a physical blow. Isabel, his Isabel, walking on a beach with another man. A kind man. A doctor who had helped her when he, her husband, had thrown her away. The irony was so cruel, so perfectly just, that it almost broke him. He had created a vacuum, and the world, in its fairness, had filled it with someone better. The investigator continued. "And Mr. Sterling, one more thing. She gave birth 3 days ago. To a boy. Mother and son are both healthy." Damien sank to the floor, the phone clattering from his hand. A son. He had a son who had been born, not in a state-of-the-art private hospital suite, but in a small town by the sea. A son whose first days were being watched over not by his father, but by a kind stranger. He had been so obsessed with uncovering Chloe's lie that he hadn't fully grasped the reality of Isabel's truth. He wasn't just trying to find his wronged wife anymore. He was trying to find his son. He booked a car. He didn't care about Dr. Ben Carter. He didn't care about anything but getting there. He had to see her. He had to see his son. He had to try, however futilely, to beg for a forgiveness he knew he would never deserve. The 5-hour drive to Porthleven was a pilgrimage of shame. The Rolls-Royce, a symbol of his insulated power, felt alien as it navigated the narrow, salt-sprayed lanes of Cornwall. This was a different world, one grounded in earth and sea, not glass and steel. He found the address the investigator had provided, a modest whitewashed cottage overlooking the harbour. Its small garden blooming with defiant coastal flowers. It radiated a warmth his mansion had never possessed. His heart hammered against his ribs as he walked to the front door. How could "I'm sorry" ever be enough to bridge the chasm he had created? Before his knuckles could even touch the wood, the door opened. A man with kind, steady eyes stood before him, his posture calm but protective. It was clearly Dr. Ben Carter. "Can I help you?" Ben asked, his voice even. "I'm Damien Sterling." Damien said the name, tasting like ash in his mouth. "I'm here to see Isabel." "She's resting," Ben replied, a wall of quiet defense. "She's been through a great deal. The unspoken accusation because of you was deafening." "Please," Damien begged, stripped of his usual authority. "I need to see my son." From within the cottage, a voice stronger and calmer than he remembered cut through the tension. "It's all right, Ben. Let him in." Damien stepped inside. The cottage was cozy and filled with light. There in an armchair sat Isabel. The haunted look he had last seen was gone, replaced by a profound, serene strength. She looked tired but at peace, and nestled in her arms, wrapped in a soft blue blanket, was a tiny, sleeping baby boy. Damien's breath caught in his throat. He stared at his son, a perfect living testament to the truth he had so cruelly denied. "He's beautiful," Damien whispered the words, thick with unshed tears. "His name is Leo," Isabel said. Her voice was level, holding neither warmth nor malice. It was the voice of a woman who had weathered his storm and reached a distant shore. "Isabel, Damien started his prepared speeches crumbling into dust. "I know everything. About Chloe the lies. I was a blind, arrogant fool. What I did to you is unforgivable. I threw you out. I called you a liar. It was monstrous. I don't expect forgiveness. I just had to see him. To see you. I'll give you anything, the divorce, the house, my entire fortune. Just please let me be his father." Isabel looked down at the sleeping baby, then back at Damien, her eyes clear and assessing. "You think money fixes this? That's always been your answer, hasn't it? Settle the account and move on." She stood up slowly, her movements deliberate. "When you threw me out, you didn't just abandon me. You abandoned him. The stress of what you did sent me into premature labor. Ben found me collapsed in a store. He saved my life," she said, her voice dropping each word a carefully placed stone. "He saved our son's life." Damien visibly flinched, the truth of her words a physical blow. "So no Damien," she continued, standing directly before him. "You don't get to just walk in here and be his father. Now that is a title you have to earn. You don't get to buy your way back." Her gaze was unflinching. "If you want to be in Leo's life, it will be on my terms. You will sell the mansion. I never want to see it again. You will establish an independently managed trust for Leo, and you will get professional help. You will find out why you destroy what is good and real in your life. You will do that work." She paused, letting the verdict settle. "But us. There is no us anymore. You broke that beyond repair. That is a consequence you have to accept." Her expression softened, not with forgiveness, but with a final heartbreaking finality. She held the bundled baby out to him. "Now," she said quietly, "if you are ready, you may hold your son." With trembling hands, Damien Sterling reached out and took the small, warm weight of his child into his arms. Looking down at the tiny, perfect face, the master of a global empire broke down and wept not for the life he had lost, but for the immense, terrifying journey of redemption. He was only just beginning. And so Damien Sterling's gilded world was shattered not by a market crash, but by the quiet, unshakable power of the truth. He learned the hardest lesson of all, that trust once broken cannot be bought back. It must be rebuilt painstakingly, with actions, not words. The story of Damien, Isabel, and Chloe isn't just about a mistress's lie. It's about the devastating consequences of choosing arrogance over intuition, and the incredible resilience of a woman who found her own strength when the world tried to take everything from her. What does redemption truly look like? Is it ever fully possible? Isabel has given Damien a path, but the journey is his to walk alone. This story is a powerful reminder that the most valuable things in life, love, trust, and family, are also the most fragile. If this story moved you, if it made you think, please give this video a like and share it with someone who appreciates a story of consequence and resilience. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more dramatic stories that explore the depths of human nature. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update, and let us know in the comments. Do you think Isabel made the right choice? Can Damien ever truly earn his way back? We can't wait to hear from you.